Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kiana, just in case you don't already know that. And today I'm very excited to do this video with you guys because today's actually my 2-year anniversary with my online book club, the Book of the Month Club. And it's a subscription service that sends you books every month. They have a selection of 5 books that you can pick from, and you're able to choose 3 book selections each month to be shipped to you. So in that 2-year period that I've been with this book club, I've read a total of 32 books with them, and 18 of them I actually really love, and they're like some of my all-time favorite books. And then 14 of them I liked, which means they were okay, but not like the best books I've ever read. And then there were another 14 out of those 32 that I just completely disliked. And when I dislike a book, I usually donate them to like Goodwill or a library or somewhere, because I don't really need them to take up room on my shelf if I'm not passionate about them and don't have any reason to hold on to them any longer. So this video is actually going to be about all the books that I really did love from my time with this book club. And so I'm really excited to get into this and go back in time and see all these books that I've read with this book club that I was completely invested in when I was reading them. So yeah, let's dive into it. Oh, I should note that I'm doing this chronologically. So I'm starting with the books that I read in 2017 when I joined with this book club. And then I'm gonna get into my book selections that I loved from the year of 2018, the few that I've read so far in 2019 that I completely love as well. So my first pick is One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter. And I absolutely love this book. This is a memoir about a young woman who is Indian, and she just talks about her experiences growing up being a woman of color and her dating experiences in America since her parents immigrated here. And I think that this book was hilarious and very well written. It's not a very long book, as you can see. It's pretty slender, but I think it was hilarious, and I would recommend this book to anybody that loves memoirs and just needs a really good laugh. This is a good pick. Second book I got is actually one of my favorite books, written by one of my favorite authors of all time. And I should mention that I didn't even know about this author until I joined this book club, and all of you guys have heard me rave about her in my last 2 videos. Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the infamous The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo book that I have been just raving about. This book is absolutely amazing, phenomenal writing. And if you don't already know, this book is about a woman named Evelyn Hugo who is being interviewed by a woman named Monique about her career as a Hollywood actress and her experiences in that time in the public eye. And in that time she was married to 7 different men, and so it just is kind of well written about, you know, how that came to be and what exactly happened for her to end up marrying all these men. I think that it's really well written, and it sounds really crazy, like, oh, okay, she's like some sort of harlot or sleep around or whatever, but this book actually gets into some really deep stuff, and I loved how everything was revealed. So if you're into that, I think that you should definitely give this book a shot, and maybe you'll fall in love with Taylor Jenkins Reid the same way I did. This is a very good starter book to get into her, I will say. This book that I read that I absolutely loved is this one called The Child by Fiona Barton. This book is a mystery. It's not a psychological thriller. It's about this detective who learns about the disappearance of a baby from a hospital years and years before, and it turns out that this baby ended up being found, or her remains were found under this now demolished apartment building. And I think that it was a crazy read, but if you love mysteries, this was such a good mystery to get into. A little bit morbid because it is about a dead baby, but if you're okay reading something like that, then this is a great pick. I would recommend this to anybody that loves a good mystery. So well written. Another book that I absolutely loved is this book called Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste NG. Or I have no idea how to pronounce her last name, so I'm just gonna leave it there. And this book is about a fire that was started in this little suburban town, and everybody thinks that the person that started this fire was this really misunderstood child to this one family that lives in this suburb, but it ends up being more than meets the eye. Not exactly who they think it is. And I just, it's hard to explain. I didn't really love this book in the beginning. The first 60 pages I thought were really kind of slow, but then it took off and the story just kind of really gripped me, and I felt very connected and invested with the characters in this book. Such a good read. The next book that I really liked from this book club that they sent me was actually kind of shocking, or a book that I was really shocked that I even liked, because it's a fantasy read, and I'm not really big into fantasy. It's not my go-to genre. It's not a genre that I read very often, but this book, there was an element in this book that you just couldn't not love. And this book is called The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman, and this book is about three sisters who are actually good witches or have some sort of supernatural ability. They don't forthright say that they're witches in this book, but it's basically they're good witches, and their family has forbidden them to use their powers, and or they do things supernaturally that is beyond their control, and people in their little town are blaming all these supernatural elements on this family because they've been shamed and kind of shunned for many years. And when their aunt falls sick, they have to come back to this city to care for their aunt, and that's why all these supernatural occurrences are going on according to all these people in the town. And so they want these three sisters to leave the town because of all the supernatural forces that are taking place and making them uncomfortable. But I did think this book was very touching, a little bit heartwarming, and kind of funny, because it's about these teenage girls that are sisters, and they have their issues and everything, but they're also you know, dealing with the fact that they have powers and they're not allowed to use them, and it's really funny. I think it's really funny. So that's it for all of my books from my first year with this book club. Going into 2018, I was very excited, you know, to start a new year with this book club that, you know, I had only been a part of for probably a good 6 months or so. And so I actually started January off with 2 books. And my first pick was this psychological thriller that is hugely popular, The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I was shook by this book. Absolutely shook, okay? I did not see the plot twist coming, and I really should have, because, I mean, it was kind of obvious. I just wasn't really connecting the dots. I just kind of was leisurely reading this book, not even thinking, oh girl, this is a psychological thriller, you should probably be paying attention to see if there are any spoilers. Although I will say that because I wasn't paying attention, that's probably why I enjoyed this book so much. If I had been paying attention more for the spoilers, to try to connect the dots and figure out the plot and everything, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed this book as much, but oh my gosh, was it good. This book follows this woman named Anna Fox, who is an agoraphobic, which means that she doesn't like to go outside, so she's a kind of just trapped in her home, and she drinks a little too much to get through her days, and she's kind of made herself accustomed to just gazing out the window of her home since she's too scared to go outside of it. And she starts to build these fake kind of invented relationships with these people that live around her. For example, this guy that lives across the street, she just kind of, you know, imagines what a life with him would be like. And so from this window, she thinks that she sees a murder and she has no idea what to do. So, yeah, that's kind of where this book goes. And I loved every single moment of this book. I thought it was wild. And I'm a huge fan of this book. So then my second January read is this book, As Bright as Heaven. And again, I will say that I made a disclaimer in my last video about not liking historical fiction because I made a comment that I don't like historical fiction, but that turns out not to be true. This book is a great example for that not being true, or me proving that that's not true. This was the first book I've ever read that was a historical fiction that kind of just shook me and made me like, oh my god, that was such a deep read, and I absolutely love it. Since Night, okay, everybody's read Night by Elie Wiesel, and that's a great book about World War II and Nazi Germany and all that. Very touching, and I love that story. But this one is like my new, or became my new favorite since Night. Okay, this book is about a family that is just kind of coping through the Spanish flu era, 1918 in Philadelphia. And so they're suffering through the Spanish flu, and the father of the household is an undertaker, and he preps the bodies, you know, for burial and everything, and for a funeral and for the viewing of the body, all that type of stuff. I don't exactly know the wording for it, whatever. The mother of the household is the cosmetologist for these dead bodies, and she patches them up to make them look better and more like themselves for their viewing. The father and the mother of this household, they have 3 children that they need to protect and keep safe from this flu. And during this time when they're, you know, very overwhelmed with all these bodies coming through, and to, you know, have to prepare them and everything for these funerals, they also come across this baby that's an orphan baby, completely healthy, and is around all these people that are very sick, and they don't know what to do. Like, do we throw this baby out who could possibly be infected, or do we bring this child in who has no one and nurse them back to health? So because they're a good family, they decide to take this baby in and nurse them back to health. And it's just a really touching story. I loved it so much. Please read this book, As Bright as Heaven by Susan Meisner. Never gonna disappoint you. So then this next book I read is called The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. This book is crazy. This book is about this haunted boarding school, and this girl, her sister, was murdered at this boarding school, and people say that it was her boyfriend who killed her, and he was tried and convicted for the murder of his girlfriend. But the sister never believed that that's really what happened, and so she bonds about this crazy theory of what happened to her sister with these 3 other girls at this boarding school. And this book is really about like friendship, and also about this crazy mystery that this one sister doesn't think is solved. And I think it's a wild story. I loved it though. I was totally here for it. So if you're into that, The Broken Girls. So the next book I read was Other People's Houses. This is a cast of characters for the story because it was pretty wild, okay? And then they had to draw like a little picture of the town inside this book because there's just so much drama in this book that you need a fucking map to figure it out. That's crazy. But that, if that's any indication of how much drama is in this book, then I mean, if that's not any indication, then I don't know what is. But this book was crazy. It's like, you know what it is? It's like a very condensed version of The Real Housewives. So if you're a fan of any of the Real Housewives shows, they've done so freaking many Real Housewives, I can't keep up anymore. You'll probably really enjoy this book because of all the craziness. Real shit. Another book that's very reality TV based is this book, The Book of Essie. I beat this book up basically because it was on vacation with me, and yeah, nothing good happens to books when they go on a crazy vacation. So this book by Megan McLean Weir is so crazy. This book is about this little Catholic family, like super religious Catholic family that is on a reality TV show. I guess they're like the Christian or very Catholic version of the Kardashians. Like, they're extremely famous. Everybody knows this family from their show, and the youngest daughter in the family, her name is Essie, well, Esther, but people call her Essie, ends up getting pregnant at 16 years old. And so this whole book is basically about her pregnancy and how to deal with that on television. And yeah, I was able to guess what happens getting pretty close to the end, but I was totally here for this book because I love reality TV, and all the drama that you see in all those reality TV shows you love are in this book. This is crazy, okay? Now, if I had to choose a favorite between these two, since they're both sort of like reality TV-ish, I would say The Book of Essie is actually the better pick. This one is just drama, 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 like drama TV to the max. This one is like drama TV plus the craziest reality TV show ever. So, but I definitely would recommend these to anybody that loves reality TV, 100%. Another one that I think is just the most amazing book ever is this book, The Dinner List by Rebecca Serrell. Okay, this book is so creative and so creative and so imaginative and so just like mind-blowing to me. I loved it. So this book is called The Dinner List because it's all about that question that we've all heard. If you could have dinner with any one person, who would you choose? Except this one is any 6 people. If you could have dinner with any 6 people, living or dead, who would you pick? And so this book is about this created or imagined dinner with this girl and her deceased dad. No, I'm sorry, deceased mom, Audrey Hepburn, and a few other people I don't want to give away. But this book was so funny to me. How she wrote Audrey Hepburn to be hilarious like that was creative as heck. I died. I was laughing through this whole book. So good. Please read this if you have any interest in anything I just said about this book. You'll love it. Then I read This Craziness, November Road by Lou Berney. And this book is about a hitman who is on the run for this murder of this big drug cartel guy that is now after him, or his people are now after him. And while he's trying to get away, he sees that this woman is stuck on the side of the road. Her car broke down. She has 2 girls in the car with her, and turns out this woman is on the run from an abusive husband. And so they end up being the perfect team together, because with her he can play off being this family man and play daddy to these kids, and it's like the perfect cover for him while he's on the run. And I thought that this was the most interesting book ever. Also, this book takes place during the assassination of Kennedy time. Towns that they're going through is already in agony and turmoil over the loss of the president of the United States, and he's, you know, running for his life. So I loved this book. I thought that this was probably one of the most thought-provoking books I've ever read, and also crazy just in terms of drama. This is another one that I would recommend to anybody that thinks that anything that I just said is interesting to them. Loved this book. So the next book I read is this book called Winter in Paradise by Evelyn Hilderbrand. And I've never read a book by Evelyn Hilderbrand before, but she's a very popular romance author, I suppose, where she writes these really twisted romances, though. I do know that. And really dramatic contemporary fiction between, like, females. Like, she writes a lot of stuff with, like, complicated female relationships. But this book I found to be a comfort read, even though it wasn't very original to me. I still read it because it brought me just something that I needed at the time. I read this book in October, and so I just got done reading like a lot of thrillers. I just felt like I needed something to kind of bring me back into wanting to read again, and this was exactly what I needed at the time. This book is about this woman whose husband dies on a plane, or his plane crashed going onto this island, and the wife was very confused because, you know, she's like, why is my husband flying to this island? He told me he was going on a business trip. And turns out he's, you know, created this whole other life for himself on this island with another woman. So I thought this book was insane, but it made me really, like, I really enjoyed reading it. It was a weird kind of story to be considered a comfort read, but to me it was a comfort read. So there's that. And this is actually going to be a series, so I'm really excited for the second book for this. And there are a few other stories that she's printing right now that aren't connected to this but sound really interesting to me, so I'm planning on picking those up soon as well. So look forward to hearing more about Evelyn Hilderbrand from me, because I'm starting to get into her based off of this one book. So that says something about this book. The next book I read was a long-awaited read for me. It's this book called 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty, and I actually love Liane Moriarty. She's one of my all-time favorite authors. She wrote What Alice Forgot, which is this crazy story about this woman that gets into a car accident and has amnesia, like cannot remember for the life of her anything that happened like a couple years before the accident. And that was a great read. So a highly anticipated read of hers for all of her super fans like me. And this book follows 9 people, obviously from the title, 9 people that are actually in this wellness center, like a wellness retreat. And it takes a turn for the worst. And I just think that's insane. Like, who goes to a wellness retreat for something crazy to happen? So I was very intrigued just based off of that storyline in itself. And I will say that of all of Leanne Moriarty's books, this was not my favorite, but I loved it anyway. So that again just says something about this author and how much I love her and her writing and everything like that. This one did take me a bit to get into, though. I will say it probably took me about 70 pages to even get into it. I almost DNF'd this book, which means did not finish this book. But something in me just told me, like, give it to 100. So I kept going until 100 pages, and by 100 pages I was like, oh my god, this thing is getting crazy. So yeah, 9 Perfect Strangers. I would definitely recommend this to anybody that likes a good drama. So the last book that I read from my Book of the Month book club is this one right here, For Better and Worse by Margot Hunt. This book is probably the most twisted love story I've ever read. This book follows a husband and wife who have a son that something terrible happens to, and they're both lawyers, and they come up with this plan to kind of protect their son. And it's a story about how far will you go to protect your children and in your relationship to protect not only your child but each other. Like, how much you love each other to protect one another. And I thought this book was insane. I was gripped probably from page 20 on. So this whole book was basically the best thing ever. So definitely pick this up if you're into a good mystery. It had some thriller aspects in here. I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked in this book the entire time. So yeah, read this. The last 3 are actually books that you guys have already heard me talk about because they were my book of the month selections for this year. So all of them have been talked about so far, I think, except for the first one. But yeah, some really good picks. So my first book read this year from the book club was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and I thought this book was the most well-written thriller I've read in a very long time. Very, very long time. First of all, it's really hard to like a thriller until you get a few pages into it, because you usually need to feel like that suspense building for it to be considered a good book. And if you don't get that suspense and it's not a good book, then it's probably not a read that you want to finish, and you end up DNFing the book. This book, I don't know how this man did it, but I was hooked from page 1. Page 1. That's how crazy this thriller was. I absolutely would recommend this to anybody that likes a good psychological thriller. If you want to be on the edge of your seat, chasing through the pages to figure out what happens, The Silent Patient is it. This book follows this woman who's an artist who's supposedly guilty of killing her husband, and she ends up in this mental facility, and in the mental facility she goes completely mute. No one's heard her say a thing since she murdered her husband. And so this doctor tries to get this woman to talk, and it's all about their relationship and how he can help this woman. And I loved this book. So The Silent Patient, pick it up. The next read I read was, of course, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I loved this book. It's all about this band and Daisy Jones, who's an individual singer. Both of them aren't really very good by themselves, and so their band manager or their manager is the same person, and he decides to merge them together to become one band, Daisy Jones and the Six. And I absolutely love this book because I absolutely love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and the writing style of this book is unmatched. It's completely different and a very fresh voice, I think. And I would definitely recommend this book to anybody that loves music, because this whole book is about musicians. So yeah. Last book that I'm going to share is Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson. This was the last book that I read last month in March, and I did not see that plot twist coming. It had me so shook, and for that reason, I would definitely recommend this to anybody. I'm not sure I would recommend this book if that plot twist wasn't there and didn't have me as shook as it did. But people tell me that I shouldn't have started with Before She Knew Him as my first Peter Swanson book, but of course I did because it came from my book club, and I loved it. I really did. And so I'm looking into more of his work. It was a little bit of a slow-paced book though, so if you don't like a very slow-paced mystery or thriller, then this book probably isn't for you. But I loved it. I loved the pacing of this book. I felt like everything was right on time. I did feel a little bit frustrated with some of the characters at some points. This wasn't my favorite thriller read of this year or from this book club. Obviously, that would be The Silent Patient. That book had me like crazy shook. But yeah, that concludes all 18 of my amazing reads from this book club. I did end up getting my 3 books for this month too. They already came. My book selection for this month was Beyond the Point by Claire Gibson. This book is so thick. I had no idea that this was the type of book that I picked this month, but apparently it is, and I'm really excited for it. Hopefully it ends up being everything that I want it to be. I'm hoping that it'll be a 5-star read because I always aim to read a 5-star book. So here's that. And then I also got some add-on books this month. I picked up The Age of Light and The Nightingale by Christina Hanna and Whitney Scherer. And I also hope that these end up being 5-star books. This one is also a thickie. And this one is a mid. Not exactly the most thick, but she's still a little hefty. So we'll see how this goes, and I'll keep you posted on what I thought about them. Be sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below for anything you'd like to see next time or any books that you have in mind for me to read. I'd love to hear what you think, and I can't wait to make the next video for you guys. See ya!